At 2 a.m., security cameras captured her walking calmly down the hallway. Hours later, he would be dead. The corridor was silent. The marble floors reflected soft overhead lighting, sterile and indifferent. Outside, the city still pulsed with life, neon signs flickering against the glass skyline. Inside, however, something had shifted, something irreversible. For years, she had been admired for her composure. Interviews described her as disciplined, elegant, reserved. Industry insiders praised her professionalism. Fans called her graceful. No one associated her name with violence. No one imagined that behind the polished appearances and carefully curated smiles, a different story was unfolding. That night did not begin with chaos. It began with a message. At approximately 11:15 p.m., he received a private request to meet. A conversation, she said, a discussion that could not wait. According to sources close to the investigation, he appeared tired but optimistic. He had just concluded a meeting regarding an upcoming role, one that promised to elevate his career even further. To the public, he was unstoppable. To some, perhaps, he was becoming too powerful. When he entered the building where she was staying, nothing appeared unusual. Surveillance footage later confirmed that both actors moved separately through the premises. No raised voices, no visible confrontation, only quiet movement through hallways that would soon become central to a criminal investigation. Authorities initially described the death as a tragic incident, an unfortunate sequence of events. The entertainment world mourned. Tributes flooded social media. Flowers gathered outside studios. His fans demanded answers, but they were prepared to accept grief without suspicion. Then the confession came. During a live police interrogation, she admitted to actions that directly contributed to his harm. The statement was brief but decisive. What had once appeared accidental was now under scrutiny for intent. Investigators began reconstructing the night minute by minute. Deleted messages surfaced. Phone records revealed unexplained gaps. Security footage captured her entering restricted areas she had no reason to access. Witnesses recalled subtle tension between them in recent weeks. Disagreements about projects, about contracts, about something deeper that never reached the public eye. Behind the glamour of premieres and award ceremonies, the entertainment industry can conceal rivalries that are invisible to audiences. Careers rise quickly, so do resentments. According to investigative sources, she had expressed concerns about losing relevance. He, meanwhile, was ascending rapidly, securing endorsements, commanding headlines, becoming the face of a generation. Was it jealousy, fear of exposure, financial pressure, or something far more calculated? The hallway footage remains haunting. Her posture steady, her pace controlled. No visible panic, no hesitation. If this was an emotional outburst, it did not look like one. As forensic teams examined digital footprints and physical evidence, a darker possibility began to emerge. This was not a spontaneous confrontation. It was a meeting arranged in advance. Routes were anticipated. Communications were erased. Movements were deliberate. The public still clings to the image of friendship. Interviews, red carpet appearances, laughter captured by cameras. But investigators are no longer looking at public performances. They are examining preparation. And what investigators uncovered in the hours that followed would shatter the illusion of friendship forever. The investigation did not begin with motive. It began with time. Every second of that night was examined, isolated, magnified. Detectives reconstructed the sequence with clinical precision, treating each minute as if it carried a fragment of truth. At 10:30 p.m., Yu Menglong exited a private production meeting in downtown Beijing. Witnesses later described him as focused, even energized. He had been discussing a major international project that industry analysts predicted would redefine his career. Contracts were nearly finalized. Endorsements were expanding. His trajectory was no longer national. It was global. At 11:15 p.m., his phone registered an incoming message. Investigators later confirmed that the message originated from Song Yiren. It was brief, direct, a request for a private conversation. According to recovered metadata, the message had been drafted earlier in the evening and revised twice before being sent. That detail alone caught the attention of digital forensic analysts. Why revise a simple request? At 11:42 p.m., security cameras captured Yu Menglong entering the residential complex where Song was temporarily staying. He was alone. No visible security detail accompanied him, despite his celebrity status. It suggested familiarity, trust. At 12:05 a.m., footage showed Song Yiren entering the same building through a secondary entrance. She was not alone. For less than 4 seconds, an unidentified individual appeared beside her. The figure wore a cap pulled low, partially obscuring facial features. The individual did not enter through the main lobby and avoided direct exposure to central cameras. Investigators enhanced the footage repeatedly. The image remained inconclusive, but the presence was undeniable. The third figure vanished from recorded view shortly afterward. At 12:37 a.m., phone activity from both devices spiked briefly, then stopped. Call logs showed deleted entries. Messaging applications reflected gaps in conversation threads. Forensic recovery teams later restored fragments of text exchanges. Most were logistical. One line, however, stood out. "We need to settle this tonight." The origin of that message remains contested. At 1 a.m., a witness residing on the same floor reported seeing Yu Menglong step into the hallway alone. According to her statement, he appeared unsettled, not frightened, but tense. He paced briefly before returning inside. Investigators could not determine whether that moment marked hesitation or realization. At 1:48 a.m., elevator records indicated a brief trip to a restricted level of the building. Access to that floor required coded authorization. Song Yiren possessed temporary credentials. Yu Menglong did not. Security logs show that her code was used. At 2 a.m., cameras captured her walking calmly down the hallway. The same footage shown during the initial broadcast that stunned the public. Her posture was composed, her movements controlled. She did not look over her shoulder. She did not rush. If an argument had occurred, it left no visible trace on her expression. At 2:12 a.m., emergency services were contacted. The caller's voice was steady. Authorities initially documented the event as a severe injury resulting from a confrontation. Details remain sealed, but investigators confirmed that the circumstances did not immediately indicate accidental harm. Physical evidence suggested struggle within a confined space, yet no signs of forced entry were found. The door had been opened willingly. Digital forensic teams later discovered something more troubling. In the hours before the meeting, Song Yiren had searched building layouts on her personal device. She accessed archived blueprints that identified secondary stairwells and camera blind spots. She also deleted browser history entries shortly before midnight. Was this precaution, curiosity, or preparation? Financial investigators uncovered an additional anomaly. 2 days before the incident, a modest transfer of funds was made from one of her private accounts to an entity under review. The amount was not significant, but its timing raised questions. The recipient remains undisclosed pending legal proceedings. By dawn, the narrative presented to the public emphasized tragedy. An unfortunate dispute, emotional escalation, a moment gone too far. However, behind closed doors, the investigative tone had shifted. The meeting had been arranged, the location selected, digital traces erased, restricted access utilized, an unidentified third presence observed. This was no longer a spontaneous disagreement. It was coordination. As analysts synchronized phone data with surveillance timestamps, another unsettling discovery surfaced. Shortly before midnight, Song Yiren's device connected briefly to a secondary burner phone registered under false identification. The connection lasted less than 30 seconds. Enough time, investigators believe, to confirm logistics. The owner of that number has not yet been publicly identified. Meanwhile, colleagues began recalling subtle signs from previous weeks. Private disagreements about casting decisions, tension during rehearsals, an argument overheard regarding an undisclosed matter. One industry insider later testified that she had expressed frustration over being pushed aside. But resentment alone does not create precision. Detectives now faced a chilling question. If the timeline indicated forethought, what was the true objective of that meeting? Was it confrontation, intimidation, or elimination? As prosecutors reviewed the assembled chronology, one fact remained impossible to ignore. The timeline was too deliberate to dismiss. But the timeline alone could not explain why she had already planned multiple exits. Timelines establish structure. Motive reveals intent. When investigators shifted from reconstructing movement to examining psychology, the narrative darkened considerably. Evidence alone could outline what happened. It could not explain why. Publicly, Song Yiren and Yu Menglong maintained the image of professional allies. Interviews captured shared laughter. Award ceremonies showcased coordinated appearances. Their joint projects generated record revenue. To audiences, they represented harmony within a competitive industry. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was less stable. Several colleagues described subtle rivalry. Casting negotiations had grown tense in recent months. A major role originally discussed for Song had ultimately been awarded to Yu Menglong, reshaping studio priorities and marketing campaigns. Sources close to production executives confirmed that financial backing increasingly favored his brand. Sponsorship contracts expanded in his direction. International exposure followed. For an actor accustomed to recognition, such shifts can alter identity. Industry psychologists consulted during the investigation emphasized that high-visibility careers often produce fragile hierarchies. Status is currency. Relevance is survival. When one star ascends rapidly, another may experience perceived displacement, even if objectively successful. According to testimony gathered during interrogation, Song Yiren admitted feeling replaced, not financially ruined, not professionally abandoned. Replaced. That distinction mattered. Digital records from her personal device revealed repeated searches related to career ranking metrics, endorsement comparisons, and public favorability scores. She tracked online engagement statistics obsessively in the months leading up to the incident. Analytical charts saved to her tablet highlighted trending disparities between her name and his. The data itself was not criminal. The pattern of fixation was. Investigators also uncovered messages exchanged between Song and a close confidant. In one recovered fragment, she wrote, "If he speaks, everything changes." The meaning of that sentence remains under legal scrutiny. However, it introduced a new dimension to motive. Jealousy alone rarely produces strategic erasure of evidence. Fear does. Rumors had circulated quietly within elite circles regarding private alliances, financial entanglements, romantic complexity. While no official confirmation has been released, multiple insiders suggested the existence of a personal relationship triangle that extended beyond professional rivalry. Authorities have neither validated nor dismissed these claims publicly. Yet forensic examination of deleted communications revealed exchanges coded in ambiguous language, references to secrecy, to loyalty, to consequences if matters became public. One recovered draft message never sent read, "You promised this would stay between us." It was time-stamped 2 weeks before the confrontation. Financial pressure may have compounded emotional instability. Records show that Song Yiren had invested in a production venture that underperformed commercially. The losses were not catastrophic, but they were significant. Simultaneously, Yu Menglong secured international distribution agreements valued in the millions. Disparity intensified. According to investigative psychologists, individuals exhibiting narcissistic traits may interpret such imbalance not as circumstantial fluctuation, but as personal betrayal. Narcissistic vulnerability does not always present as overt arrogance. It can manifest as hypersensitivity to status shifts, to public perception, to comparison. Obsessive jealousy, when fused with perceived exposure risk, can accelerate into catastrophic reasoning. During a recorded segment of her interrogation, Song reportedly stated, "I could not let him destroy everything." Investigators pressed for clarification. What exactly did she believe was at risk? Reputation? Financial stability? Hidden relationships? The answer remains partially sealed. Yet prosecutors indicated that her statement referenced more than professional frustration. It implied knowledge. Information possessed by Yu Menglong that she believed could compromise her position within influential circles. That possibility reframed the case entirely. If she acted to silence potential disclosure, then the confrontation was not merely emotional. It was protective, calculated. Witnesses later described changes in her demeanor during the weeks preceding the incident. Increased isolation, heightened irritability. A pattern of private meetings with individuals unaffiliated with her official management team. Surveillance review confirmed several late-night visits to private offices not listed in her production schedule. No direct evidence has publicly linked those meetings to the tragedy. However, their timing aligned with escalating digital erasure patterns on her devices. Legal experts observing the case noted that premeditation is rarely defined by a single action. It is defined by accumulation, repeated search queries, strategic deletions, financial anomalies, secured access codes, and most critically, deliberate communication inviting the victim to a private, controlled environment. As investigators constructed her psychological profile, three dominant themes emerged. First, status anxiety amplified by measurable decline in comparative metrics. Second, fear of exposure linked to confidential, personal, or financial matters. Third, escalating fixation evidenced by digital surveillance of Yu Menglong's schedule and contractual negotiations. The image that emerged was not one of spontaneous rage. It was one of mounting internal pressure, a pressure concealed beneath professional composure. Public discourse has simplified the narrative to envy. Yet envy does not revise messages multiple times before sending. Envy does not research architectural layouts. Envy does not erase call logs systematically. Intent requires planning, and planning suggests anticipation of consequences. In the final moments of interrogation recorded that night, investigators confronted her with enhanced footage of the unidentified third individual entering the building. For several seconds, she remained silent. Then she spoke. What she said next shifted the investigation in a direction even authorities had not anticipated. And then she revealed something investigators had not expected. The interrogation room fell silent after her final statement. Investigators had expected denial, perhaps emotional collapse. What they encountered instead was controlled disclosure, not a breakdown, not hysteria, a measured response. When confronted with enhanced footage of the unidentified individual entering the building beside her, Song Yiren did not deny the presence. She asked one question: "Has he spoken?" The phrasing altered the trajectory of the case. Authorities immediately expanded the scope of inquiry. Digital forensics teams were instructed to isolate all external communications within 72 hours before the confrontation. The previously detected burner phone connection moved from anomaly to priority. Telecommunication analysts traced the number through layered registrations and prepaid transfers. The device had been activated only days before the incident. It connected briefly to cell towers near the residential complex, then powered off permanently after 2:18 a.m. Temporary. Disposable. Intentional. Financial investigators revisited the modest transfer flagged earlier. While the amount alone did not indicate conspiracy, forensic accounting revealed it was routed through a shell entity tied to a private consulting group frequently retained by entertainment figures for risk management. The designation was vague. The services undocumented. Legal authorities have not publicly confirmed the function of this payment. However, internal memoranda referenced potential facilitation. Witness interviews began revealing subtle patterns previously dismissed as coincidence. A production assistant recalled seeing Song engaged in an intense conversation with a man matching the silhouette captured on camera several weeks earlier. The exchange had taken place in a private parking structure. The assistant had assumed it involved contractual negotiations. Another source reported overhearing a comment from Song during a closed rehearsal. "If he forces my hand, I will not hesitate." At the time, the remark appeared metaphorical. Context changes interpretation. Investigators now examined whether the confrontation was meant solely to intimidate, a warning, a negotiation, or whether escalation had always been anticipated. The restricted floor access that night contained service corridors with limited surveillance coverage. Blueprints recovered from her search history indicated awareness of these blind spots. Prosecutors argue this demonstrates environmental control. Defense counsel, however, contends that the research could have been unrelated. Yet when synchronized with communication gaps and third-party presence, the pattern tightens. Authorities also identified a second encrypted messaging account linked indirectly to Song's primary device. Though the account contained minimal recoverable content, login metadata corresponded with dates of private meetings she did not disclose to management. If she coordinated assistance, the coordination was compartmentalized. Strategic isolation of information reduces liability. Investigative analysts proposed three emerging possibilities. First, she enlisted assistance solely to stage a confrontation, underestimating escalation. Second, She intended reputational coercion and relied on a third party to ensure privacy. Third, the objective extended beyond confrontation, and the third individual served a functional role in execution or containment. Each scenario carries distinct legal implications. Public discourse often gravitates towards simple narratives: a jealous rival, a tragic outburst, a singular villain. However, high-profile industries operate within layered power structures. Alliances shift, leverage accumulates, silence becomes currency. If Yu Menglong possessed information capable of destabilizing influential figures, his elimination would serve more than personal resentment. It would protect networks. Investigators have not publicly substantiated such claims. Nevertheless, financial cross-referencing revealed that 2 additional individuals within the industry withdrew substantial funds shortly after the incident. The transactions remain under confidential review. Coincidence remains possible. Coordination remains plausible. During a subsequent interrogation session, Song Yiren reportedly clarified one element. She stated that she did not intend for it to end this way. The ambiguity of that sentence has fueled debate. And what? The meeting? The confrontation? His life? Language in legal proceedings matters. Prosecutors interpret her phrasing as acknowledgement of risk awareness. Defense attorneys argue it suggests unintended escalation. Yet the presence of multiple exits mapped in advance complicates claims of spontaneity. Investigators determined that within the hour preceding the confrontation, her device accessed ride service applications without completing a booking. The implication was preparation for rapid departure. Planned exit strategies are not hallmarks of impulsive behavior. As authorities widened the circle of inquiry, industry reaction intensified. Studios quietly commissioned internal audits. Private security contracts were reviewed. Several executives retained independent legal counsel despite not being formally named in proceedings. Fear spreads quickly in environments built on influence. Meanwhile, digital analysts reconstructed geolocation patterns of the unidentified individual. The limited signal data placed the device near a secondary transit hub shortly after 3 a.m. Surveillance review from that area remains ongoing. If confirmed, the movement suggests coordination beyond the immediate building. The possibility of conspiracy introduces complexity beyond individual motive. It transforms a personal tragedy into systemic exposure. If she acted with assistance, the assistance implies shared knowledge. Shared knowledge implies shared interest. And shared interest implies risk to those invested in maintaining silence. Publicly, authorities maintain that Song Yiren remains the primary defendant. Official statements caution against speculation regarding accomplices, yet investigative focus on third-party communication persists. The question now confronting prosecutors is not solely what she did, it is who benefited. Because if she did not act alone, then this was never just a crime, it was a conspiracy. The courtroom was silent when Song Yiren entered. Cameras were prohibited inside, yet the atmosphere outside resembled a global spectacle. Protesters gathered behind barricades. Some held portraits of Yu Menglong. Others carried placards demanding accountability. His name echoed through chants that blended grief with anger. Inside, the tone shifted from emotion to procedure. Prosecutors presented a structured case built on digital reconstruction, surveillance analysis, financial anomalies, and recovered communications. Each exhibit stripped glamour from the narrative and replaced it with precision. Timestamps, access logs, metadata, forensic diagrams projected onto courtroom screens. The defense emphasized ambiguity. They argued that tension does not equal intent, that planning a private meeting does not prove planning harm, that digital deletions, while suspicious, are not in themselves acts of violence. Yet the prosecution returned repeatedly to one central element: preparation, architectural research, deleted communications, restricted access usage, unidentified assistance. When the enhanced footage of the hallway appeared before the court, the room did not react audibly. It did not need to. The image had already circulated globally. Her posture remained steady, her expression unreadable. Jurors studied the frame, not for emotion, but for calculation. Legal analysts observing the proceedings noted that the case would likely hinge on interpretation of premeditation. Was the meeting intended as negotiation, as coercion, or as controlled elimination? Song Yiren took the stand briefly. Her testimony was restrained. She admitted to arranging the meeting. She acknowledged emotional conflict. She denied intent to cause fatal harm. When questioned about the unidentified third individual, she invoked legal counsel and declined further comment. The silence was strategic. Outside the courtroom, the entertainment industry recalibrated rapidly. Production houses severed ties. Endorsement contracts dissolved. Public relations teams issued carefully worded statements emphasizing compliance with the law and support for transparency. Private communications among executives suggested a deeper concern. Not only reputational damage, but exposure. If accomplices were confirmed, disclosure could extend beyond one individual. Public trust eroded visibly. Fan forums that once celebrated celebrity alliances shifted towards skepticism. Audiences began questioning curated friendships and manufactured narratives. Yu Menglong's memorial services continued in multiple cities. Candlelight vigils flickered against night skylines. Speeches described his talent, discipline, and generosity. Yet beneath the tributes lay a shared unease. Had warning signs been ignored? Had ambition been mistaken for dedication? Had the industry normalized rivalry so thoroughly that escalation became invisible? Experts predict the verdict will reverberate beyond a single career. If conspiracy charges emerge, the case could expose structural vulnerabilities within the entertainment hierarchy. If the court determines sole responsibility, the narrative will remain tragic but contained. Either outcome reshapes perception. Because the illusion has fractured, the glamour remains, but it no longer appears untouchable. As proceedings continue, investigators quietly pursue unanswered questions regarding financial transfers and burner phone coordination. The public may never see the entirety of that inquiry. Certain findings could remain sealed under legal discretion, but the impact is already irreversible. Song Yiren once represented aspiration. Yu Menglong embodied ascension. Now their names are permanently linked to a night defined by secrecy, preparation, and irreversible consequence. History will record the legal outcome. Memory, however, will preserve the fracture. In the end, the question is no longer who did it. The question is how many knew.